This is John Jackson Miller. I'm the founder of Comichron.com, and I'm here with the early look at the sales charts for May 2018. Now, these are based on the charts that come from Diamond Comic Distributors. We do some additional analysis on them to figure out what the overall size of the business is, and then we go back and look at how this month compares to the previous months in the history of the business. And one of the nice things about May 2018 is that it compares well with the same month the previous year, just like April was. April with Action Comics 1000 out. This time we had Amazing Spider-Man 800 out, became the #1 comic book in units and dollars for the month. And what's decent about this particular thing happening at this moment in time is that it managed to beat a month from last year, 2017, which was the biggest month of the year. This was a month that, in an otherwise down year, was a 5-week month, had a lot of comics released in it. It was something that a few months ago we would have been hard pressed to reach the figure that we did. In fact, we ended up making $49.05 million as our estimate. That's the amount of the total dollar figure of all the comics and graphic novels that retailers ordered in the month. Being able to see something close to 50 million again. This is the first time that we've been at this level since November 2016. And of course, November 2016 is in what we would consider the first down month of the comics recession, or the first down quarter of the recession. A recession in general terms is defined as any time when you've got two negative growth quarters in a row. The slump in comics that followed the DC Rebirth launch in 2016 began in the fourth quarter of 2016. We were down every single quarter in 2017. We were down the first quarter of 2018, although things were improving during the previous 2 quarters. And now we have this situation where even though we are still down a bit for the year, we are actually in striking distance of a positive year at this point. And the month of April and May are up enough that June would have to be pretty bad for the second quarter of this year not to be a positive quarter. That would then break the recession, at least as that is defined. I'll get a little bit more into that later, but let's look quickly at some of the other things that are the top sellers. Amazing Spider-Man, of course, 800. Had lots and lots of variants, and is a $10 book, so it's not a surprise that it's the top unit and dollar book. We move along to graphic novels. Star Wars Tag and Bink Were Here is actually an $8, almost a comic book, but it's in the graphic novel category as Diamond has defined it. Pretty much anything with a spine on it winds up in the graphic novel category, as well if it's something that it's going to be a permanent stock item at Diamond, if it's going to get a star system number or something like that in Diamond's backlist. Then something will be defined as a graphic novel as opposed to a comic book. That was #1 in units for the month. Not really a surprise, though, that the #1 graphic novel in dollars was Infinity Gauntlet. It had led the reorders just about the entire month. And this is the 2001 printing of this book. And of course, the book itself is more than 20 years old at this point, 25 years old at this point. And it's something where all of the attention to the Infinity War movie paid off for this particular product, and it managed to beat a whole lot of other graphic novels that were brand new. And so we'll see that list in more detail in a moment. First, let's go quickly to look at the top five for the month. This is May 2018 comic sales to comic shops, and we see we've got four out of the five being Marvel books, and three out of those are Marvel Fresh Start launches: Venom, Avengers, and Black Panther, with Doomsday Clock 5 showing up on in third place. And one of the things that is sort of interesting about this month is how much stuff came out the last week of the month. Fifth week months, Memorial Day used to be a month where publishers just wouldn't take the field with anything. Instead, we got several books. I think Amazing 800 was May 30th, Doomsday Clock 5 as well. And I think even Man of Steel was May 30th. So we had a whole lot of stuff that hit that last week that made it worthwhile for people to show up at the stores. Again, 49.05 million. That's 7% increase over April, 2% increase over May. Now, there's a book that we don't see in this top five, and it is a book that probably sold more copies. And we'll get a bit into some of the complexities of this in a minute. But DC Nation Zero is a 25-cent comic book, a sampler comic book that came out first week of the month. It was there in time for Free Comic Book Day, and it's a sampler with three different stories in it. And by reports from DC, it had something like close to 1 million copies ordered. It does not wind up in Diamond's charts because anything priced below $1 is considered to be a promotional item. It's considered to be something that really it doesn't make a lot of sense to put it in the same basket with all the comic books that are averaging $3 and $4 and in comparison there. And so it's something that just doesn't end up in those lists. But to get to our charts again, May versus April, up 7%. Almost exactly 7% is the figure overall. And this is in part because we've got an extra week here in May as opposed to April. We have a 5 shipping week month, and we see that we're up in every single category. And when we look at the more important comparison, which is May 2018 versus May 2017, we'll see that we've got one category, comics, dollar sales is up. That's that leftmost column, and 6.23%. Dollar sales for comics graphic novels are up 1.84% year over year. Everything else is down, although the reason that comics figure on the unit sales side on the right there is down is that we had in 2017 in the month of May we had Saga 43, which is a 25-cent book. Diamond did include that both in the market shares and then also in the overall number of units that they were keeping track of for these year-to-year comparisons. DC Nation Zero counted for DC as far as market share, did not count for the industry overall, though, did not count for the direct market as far as these year-to-year comparisons. So, in point of fact, if you threw DC Nation into May 2018's overall total, we would have been up 3 or 4%. And my sense is that probably Diamond just did not want to include something that was that big of an outlier in there. One of the things that they already do is they omit the Free Comic Book Day titles from being part of that basket. Again, because it just sort of distorts things and it gives people the sense that there's a whole lot more units being sold than there actually are of the comics that are priced at $3 and $4. And our year to date, as mentioned, we've made up ground. We're now just 2 2/3% off year to date in dollars. And in the right hand column, we have comics are still off, but we're now down under 10%. And that again is partially distorted because we had in 2017 Not only was Saga counted, but also we had a 25-cent Spawn, and there were a lot of Marvel overships in there earlier in the year. So again, it's better to look at the dollars charts for just about everything. Graphic novels still down, but it's now just down in the single digits, off 9%. Comics are actually positive year to date in terms of dollars. So that is a change that happened this month. Now to look at the market shares real quick. We've got the Marvel is the dollar share leader and the unit share leader. Marvel benefits from having obviously Spider-Man 800. That's a $10 book. That makes a big difference to the dollar shares. DC, here is where we can see that it's clear that DC Nation is in the picture for their market shares, because that unit share is quite a lot higher than DC's dollar share, and that's kind of a tip off that that's the case. No real surprises farther down the list. You'll see things like Viz being almost 3 times higher in dollar share than unit share. Again, that's because Viz doesn't do comic books. Viz only does manga. Viz only does higher priced items. And so let's move on to the top 10. We've got, as mentioned, 4 Marvel books in the top 5, and those are fresh start titles. DC gets a couple of Batmans in there. Justice League No Justice, which was the top reorder book a couple of weeks in the month. Man of Steel 1. This is interesting. Man of Steel had no variants. Everything else under the sun had a variant cover. Man of Steel, this weekly series, DC made the decision to just focus it all on that one version of the book. That asterisk means that the book is returnable. And so when we see the actual estimated numbers, they're going to be slightly reduced versus what the title actually shipped. Man of Steel may have actually wound up higher on this ranking. We just won't know until the end of the year. When we look at the dollar chart, we see a couple of different titles in here, including, look there's Action Comics 1000 back in the month of May. That is really significant. I think that if it has managed to make it into the top 10 to 6th place in the top comics by dollars, you can guess from that that this is a book that's going to have a significant finish once all of the figures for May are out. And it will certainly add to the number of copies that we saw in the previous month. Let's look now at the graphic novels. As mentioned, Star Wars Tag and Bink, that $8 book, is there at the top. Infinity Gauntlet, again, even by units, is number 2. The most expensive book in the top 10 is Dark Days: The Road to Metal. That's a hardcover there. Everything else that you're going to see on these charts, unless it says HC, it's a soft cover. We don't use the trade paperback abbreviation in the Comichron charts because it would be on almost every graphic novel. And so let's move on now to graphic novels by dollars. One of the things that Marvel did this month is they had a deep discount event for their older Marvel Masterworks hardcovers. None of those make this chart, and the reason is that the dollar charts and the dollar rankings for Diamond are based on invoice dollars. This is what the retailers paid to Diamond, not the cover price. And so as a result, we have here, there is one Marvel Masterworks book, Marvel Team Up Volume 3, that shows up here. That was a book that was solicited a few months ago, so that's actually a new book. They probably got most of cover price, or rather most of what they would normally expect to get on that title. But when we see the larger list, we're going to see a lot of Marvel Masterworks books in there, and that will be the reason for that. We've got probably our top dollar value book here in the top 10 is in 10th place. That's Weapon X, The Return, $125. Otherwise, yes, we got two Infinity War related titles, Gauntlet and then Infinity War at 7th place. Now we'll take a look at the number of items shipped in the month. And this is one of the reasons why I think that May's performance is better than it looked on paper, and that is because the number of comics that were shipped by the publishers, 472, is actually down 10% versus May in the previous year. So comics dollars were up, and we wound up getting there by having what was actually 55 fewer comic books sold or offered to market. So that means that each title that came out was doing relatively better per capita or per title. Graphic novels, graphic novel sales were down 8% for the month. We actually had 8% more graphic novels or more new graphic novels shipped to market this May than last May. So, we can kind of say it was the opposite happening there. We threw more stuff at the market that just didn't do quite as well. But again, we do have a situation where retailers were redirecting dollars towards backlist items in the graphic novel category, and so there really isn't that big new hit out there. Anytime when a comic book that's or a graphic novel that's almost 30 years old is able to top the list, that means that it's not a month in which we've got a lot of action in the new stuff. So anyway, that is the month of May. An early look at it. We're going to have on Comichron soon after this posting the estimates, the actual estimates for the month. You'll be able to find a link to those estimates and to our article about this in the description section of this video. And then if you go to Comichron and just want to see any given month there, including June, you just go to the monthly comic sales page. There's a tab for it on just about every page, and you can take a look at everything this year, last year, the last 10 years, the last 20 years. It's all there. And until next time, we'll see you in the comic shop.